Okay, so thanks everyone for dialing in. Thanks, James, especially for agreeing to agreeing to put this seminar on, along with Ride with GPS. Basically, tonight we thought we'd talk around some of the sort of peripheral stuff on around route planning. So we're not going to go for the how to use Ride with GPS type stuff, which we did a session on with Alex on YouTube a couple of weeks ago, and you can all go and watch that if you haven't already. That's on YouTube via the Ride with GPS link that you got in your emails. But tonight's session is going to be more around the stuff that you might be thinking about when you're planning your route. So about resupply, about where you might be at night, about where you might be on a Sunday, about what the weather might be like at altitude on different parts of the route, all that kind of stuff. So James is going to talk to you all from his really extensive experience. I'm guessing for most of you, he doesn't need a lot of introduction, but he's our former TCR winner twice, and a lot of other amazing race results as well, across a spectrum of road and off-road and everything in between. So James has a wealth of experience. Really glad that he can come and share it with us. Thank you, James. And yeah, I'll kind of allow you to take it away, and can maybe yeah, I'll be here if we get any questions through or anything like that. So over to you, James.
Great. All right. Thanks very much, Andrew. I really appreciate it. My intention is to talk for about half an hour or so, and then we can do some questions afterwards. I thought what I'd do is I'm just going to mute everyone now. And now everyone else should be muted. And then there's not going to be any interference and things like that. So I'm going to talk to you for half an hour. I'm, as Andrew said, going to give you some tips and tricks and general things that have come to me on route planning, rather than going into specifics of the software. I know Alex covered that and you have access to that talk. And then also Ride with GPS, they have a really great support system. So if you have any kind of more technical questions on route planning, you can always email the support team and they generally get back to you within 24 hours. So I'm not going to go there. And then we'll have some questions afterwards. So if you have a question as we go, write it down, or you can put it in the chat here, and then we'll come to them and deal with anything that crops up a couple of times or things in that session afterwards. So I hope this is going to be really useful for you. There's some really good information, and there's not many trade secrets that I'm worried about keeping these days. So there should be some nice ones in here for you. I wanted to break this down into 3 phases, and I've got some notes that I've written down, and I will try and get these out to you afterwards as well. So don't worry about trying to remember everything. The 3 phases are before starting your route planning, during your route planning, and then during the event. And as I go through kind of my tips, I think you're going to see why it's broken down into these 3 phases and why you need to stick to these phases when working. Obviously you can't jump into the event and do the event without having a route, but you could start planning a route without doing some other things first. And I think you're going to be wasting time and making mistakes if you do that. So I think the first thing that's really important and that I really want to say, and probably seems obvious, and some of these things are going to seem obvious, but sometimes the most obvious things are the ones that people overlook, or they go, that's really easy, I don't need to think about that because it's easy, and it just gets missed. And that is that route planning is so important. People talk about fitness and they do their training and they might talk about their gearing and they talk about all these other things. And when they write out a weekly schedule, they put all of their training in there. But in the weekly schedule, they don't necessarily put time aside for route planning like you would. Oh, on Wednesday, I'm going to do 1 hour of route planning. Not on Wednesday, I'm going to do 1 hour of, hill intervals or something. So for me, I think it's really important that every week you're booking in time to be doing your route planning. A little bit, frequently and often, will get you there in the end. Don't be that person that's like 2 weeks out for the event scrambling because they've just not done any route planning. They've got so much fitness, but they've got no route. With reasonable fitness and a really great route, your chances of getting to the finish are really good. But with amazing fitness and an okay to bad route, you're not going to get to the finish. And that extra time that you'll gain from that fitness is just going to get obliterated when you're riding around in circles in Romania because you're lost, because your route's terrible. So don't forget that. As they say, Transcontinental themselves, it's a race for masters of self-reliance. And it's really true. And for me, TCR has always had like 5 pillars to it, which are fitness. It is important. The route, really important. The mental side, when you're out on the road dealing with things as they come up. Equipment, the right bike, the right gears, and then strategy, pacing, food, and all these things. And all 5 of those things are crucial. You miss any one of them and your race is over. So route is there. Put time aside every week and be doing it. It's so important. So my second point is that when you're route planning, break it down into sections. Now, this one might seem obvious, it might not. And when you're breaking it down into sections, the way to go about this, I found to be best, is that obviously you're going to have to be at the start and you're going to have to go through CP1. So that's one section. Then from CP1, you're going to have to go from CP1 to CP2. So that's one section as well. If you try and look at the whole thing as one whole route and try and do that, it just gets too much. But if you break it into those sections of start to CP1 to CP2, etc., then it's going to make it a lot more manageable. And you can plan those sections individually and separately, and then bring it together at the end if you want to view the whole thing in total numbers. So sections is always the way to do that. Now, another thing that's quite important is to understand what kind of rider you are, and what kind of route you might need or want as a rider. And this is a bit more theoretical and conceptual, but it's really quite important to have an understanding of a few points that are important to you. And for example, you might really like climbing. You might really like being in the mountains. So your route, is going to be happier to be in the mountains. If there's 2 options that are looking more flat or in the mountains, you're going to be okay going through the mountains. Maybe you're, someone who doesn't really like climbing, someone who struggles climbing, you're not going to want to go through the mountains so much. And if you had to take an extra 100 kilometers to avoid, a couple, some thousands of meters of climbing, you might take that as the option. Okay. Maybe you're someone who doesn't like heat, so you might want to avoid like long stretches in valleys and things like this. So if you think a bit about who you are as a rider, what kind of riding you enjoy, what kind of riding you're good at, it can help you understand where you might want your route to go to profit the most from that. And I think there's one point that's quite important, and even I would think about this, is risk versus reward, okay? And what sort of risk you are willing to take on, and what is your risk profile, If you're there to race and you're there to win, maybe you're willing to take on more risk on where your route goes. The alternative is that you're there, you just want to finish. Doesn't matter how long it takes you to finish. You just want to get to the party, and you're there for the adventure, and you're there for the personal challenge. Yes, it's a race, but it's really an individual challenge for everyone. And your risk profile is a bit lower, and you want to take roads and go to places that might be a bit safer. And I think when thinking about playing a route, this is a really important point. Do I want to go down this really busy dual carriageway because it's going to be quick, or do I want to take a slightly more meandering route that's potentially going to be a bit quieter? There is the fallacy with this that actually that really busy dual carriageway might have a really nice hard shoulder that's really safe to ride on, whereas the quiet road might be winding, and it might be through Italy, which a lot of the route is, and cars come around really quickly on corners on roads. And so the point is just to think about safety and your risk profile when you're planning the route, and not just about, is this the fastest way, is this the easiest way? So build that in as you're coming to it. Talking about fixed locations that you have to go to is border crossings. Okay, so obviously you're going to have to go to checkpoints, but border crossings are only in specific places, and you're not going to go through any illegal ones, so it's only legal ones. So these are kind of pinch points on the route. So when you're looking at the bigger picture of the start, the checkpoints and things, you should be marking potential border crossings on a map as well. Whether that's just using Rover GPS and putting points of interest on the page, or whether you like to have a big kind of map on the wall and you want to highlight stuff. But you need to do research to find out where those border crossings are, so you know where you're going to need to funnel through to get from one country to another, because those are specific points, and they could be part of the sections of the routes. There's no point planning a great route from Albania to Romania and not considering the border crossings. Don't just assume that the border crossing the software might use, if you use the automatic algorithm, is one that's acceptable, that the time of days are wide enough and things like this. So border crossings come in that phase before you start your route planning and understanding where they are. And obviously, if you've got stuck into the route planning and you haven't done your border crossings yet, pause, go and do them, and then come back. And it's going to really help you save time and be efficient. The final one that I've got here on my list for before starting a route planning is understanding the rules and the regulations of the event. Okay. And I know that what I would hope, I don't know by now, but I'd hope that you have your banned roads and sections and things mapped from the TCR, so you know where you can go and where you can't go. You've read the manual, you know what roads and specific things like this are banned. And then also you starting to understand what the local customs and rules are for different places. For example, in Hungary, you're not going there, but it's a good example. You can only ride on bike paths, and if there is a bike path, it's obligatory to ride on it, and you can't ride on the road, even if it's the worst bike path in the world. Or Germany, it's like this as well. So it's really important to understand those local rules. And one thing with this is, if you're looking on the Ride with GPS heat map and things like this, the local custom, what locals might do in an area, isn't necessarily what is technically by the law and not by the law. So don't just assume something is okay to ride on because there's heat on it. It might be that the locals ride on it because whatever, they don't care. But if you're riding on it, then maybe you're going to be in trouble. Okay. I think the only other point to make on this one is the understanding of the rules and the regulations is that TCR map or banned roads can change in the lead up to the event. Everyone has an opinion, and people like to give opinions about what should and shouldn't be ridden on. And I know I've done that in the past, so I'm not blaming anyone, but be checking that to see if it's changed or not, and just be considerate that it might be changing, because there is precedent for stuff getting banned quite near the event, even during the event, when I found the road in Romania too dangerous. So don't just assume that your route is okay. All right. Generally, they should be putting out email communications to say so-and-so is now banned to keep you updated, but just be aware of that, all right? Because you wouldn't want to fall foul of the rules inadvertently, because ignorance isn't an excuse, okay? So these are my before you start route planning things. Obviously, if you started already, that's fine. If there's something on this list that you might have missed, then maybe it's worth coming back to it now, addressing it, and then going forward again, okay? Because I think these things will make your route planning more efficient and better when you get into it. So my second phase is the route planning itself. And this really is like a mammoth task. You have 4,000 to 4,500 kilometers of route to plan across Europe through countries you've potentially never been, with completely different customs, languages, road networks, all sorts. It's huge. If you've done the event before, you have a big advantage. If you live in one of these countries, you have a big advantage. If you have a friend in one of these countries, you have a big advantage. So if you've never been to one of these countries before, or you've never done TCR, don't feel bad about it being difficult. It is. Don't feel bad about asking someone for help or whatever. I don't know if they've put some new rule in the manual that you can't, but in my personal opinion, asking people for help with route planning is great. Like, do it. It increases safety if you can find out some roads are maybe dangerous and things like this. And also, before something starts, before the event starts, everyone has different advantages. Maybe someone's rich, maybe someone's poor, maybe someone has lots of time, maybe someone has no time. So there's no problem with asking people for help with your route planning. All right. No, you can't get someone to plan it for you personally, because that just takes away the whole spirit of everything. But if you're collaborating and working with other people to improve your route, to make it more safe, that's a really great thing. Okay. And everyone has different advantages. So I think one of the big point here is don't try and plan a route and plot a route for every eventuality. And what I mean by this is, when you've started to get your route together, don't go along the route putting points of interest on every single petrol station or every single place that has food, making a huge Excel, hundreds of cells long of everywhere you could stop. Because it's going to be so big and so long that it's going to be impossible and pointless to use, okay? You might want to mark some more important things on the map, that if there's ferry crossings like there are, what the times of those are, alternative ferry crossings. Maybe you're going to be at the ferry crossing, maybe you want to mark a couple of hotels in there, or some food places that are open 24 hours a day, because you're definitely going to have to stop there for time, maybe a few bike shops here and there. But trying to do everything is just a waste of your time. You're a lot better spending that time either refining your route planning or just on something else, understanding your route, learning a route so it's well put in your head, getting better with the app and things like this. So don't try and like plan every single stop, because it's not going to work. Okay, use that time to learn how to find things on the fly, using your phone. The next one, when you're route planning, is you need to think about where you want to go on your route. And I know that sounds kind of obvious. Obviously, you need to plan where you want to go, but some places that you're going to travel through take longer to travel through, are more difficult to travel through, and increase your potential risk of an accident than others. And by this I mean cities, built up places, main roads, specific areas like the Po Valley in Italy is very industrialized. It's very busy, so it's more difficult to travel through. And so one route option might be shorter with a less elevation than another, but it might have two cities on it and a town, and then you go through a busy valley, and it might actually take you longer because of that. Cities are so slow to travel through. Big towns are so slow to travel through, red lights, all of this. So just think about that when you're plotting a route. Don't just think, I'm going to go through this city or this town because it's going to have loads of food. All this. Yes, you need resupply now and again, but avoiding busy places can be really useful and improve your efficiency. The next point is that you need to learn to use the navigation app as well. So obviously most of your route planning is going to happen on the computer, but you need to be able to use the application as well. And this comes in the route planning phase, because when you're out on the event, you're undoubtedly going to have to reroute yourself at some point, because there will be either a problem with the route you've made, or something will have changed on the actual road, might be closed, all sorts of things could happen, and you will need to then reroute. So you need to spend time understanding how to make a route, how to transfer that route from your phone to your GPS device, or just to navigate on your phone, so that you can do that out there on the event. And so you can be doing this when you're planning a route. You can be doing this when you're out training. You can ride yourself to somewhere, then have to make a route on the fly on your phone and get yourself back home. And this is a really important thing to be doing, because if you don't, when you're out there, you'll have to waste so much more time working out how to make a route, how to transfer across, and all of these problems that you could have just saved by spending a couple of hours. So that's a really important one. Route planning techniques. Now, I know Alex gave you a long talk on how to use the right GPS tools and things like this. So I'm going to kind of tell you that sometimes the way that the algorithms work on route planning tools isn't necessarily what you want it to do. They're very good at planning nice cycle routes, but you don't necessarily want a nice cycle route. What you want is a fast and efficient route between A and B that you can cycle on. Okay. And with that, you need to think about which option you're using for planning or routing. Obviously on Ride with GPS, and I talk about this, there are multiple ones you can pick, like driving, you can pick cycling, you can maybe pick off-road cycling, you can pick walking, or you can do lines. And actually you might find that using the driving option gets you closer to where you need to be initially, and then you can check and optimize from there. Because if you pick the cycling one, it might just take you down nice bike paths, which is lovely, really great for cycling, but not necessarily good for getting from A to B to be the fastest. So when you're using the tool, you need to try and think about how you're using the tool in the way that you want it to give you a result where you want to get to. All right. And I'm not saying use the driving option and then just cycle down it blindly. No, use it as your starting point, potentially, and then try and optimize from there. You might find it quicker to get to where you need to be than starting with the cycling option and getting you to where you need to be. Okay. But I say that with caution, and I say that with, you're going to have to look at it and you're going to have to put some work into it and think about it. Okay. The next one is like base maps. Obviously on Ride Your GPS, there are multiple base maps that you can use. And this is one of the things that I really like and can be very useful. I tend to just use OSM and their raw OSM map, because I've used that for years and years and years, and I find it the most comfortable for me to use. I'm very familiar with it. Ride Your GPS have been developing their own OSM maps. It's very good. You can obviously use Google Terrain Maps, because on Google Terrain Maps, you can start to see where mountain ranges are quite easily, and it's going to give you a higher level, more macro kind of vision of what the route's going to look like. Obviously, if you've got a route, you might want to be dropping pins on Google Maps and the satellite to see what specific roads are looking like. You know, whether there's something that's in good condition, tarmac, or bad condition, maybe it's gravel. You know, on Google Satellite as well, you can, if you zoom in quite far, a lot of the quality on it's really quite good now. And if you spend a bit of time training your eye, looking at different surfaces that you know what they're like, you can start to discern what something is actually going to be like, whether it's tarmac, whether it's nice tarmac with a white line, whether it looks like gravel, whether it looks quite rough. There's a bit of, you know, interpretation, but if you spend a bit of time training your eye, you can do that. And obviously trying to work out what the surface type is like on something is really important, because, you know, better surface, quicker it's going to be. Also, the point with OSM maps is the key is really quite obvious, and OSM maps are generally frequently updated by locals, even in Eastern Europe. And so I found that the data on OSM is quite up to date, quite good, and the type of road is generally marked correctly as what you can expect. And so the information that you're getting from it is really quite high value, versus potentially Google Maps or other versions that are a bit more out of date. Finding local information, I think this is really important. Obviously, you know, if you're from America, or from the UK, trying to understand what the roads are going to be like in Albania or you know, Romania or anywhere is going to be a bit more difficult for you. So you need to find local information. There are various ways you can go about this. You can ask people you know you've been there before, maybe other people doing TCR. But you've got to kind of get a bit inventive sometimes. I used to go and look on Ride with GPS. It's a bit more easier now, but you go and look for people that are making routes in those areas. And then, you know, if they're making routes in those areas, there's locals and you can ask them. What you can do on Ride with GPS now is you can kind of right click on maps, and you can start to see what routes have been planned in specific places when you're planning a route, and looking at that information. So that's really useful as well. So trying to find local information is really important. There are ways to do it. And, you know, obviously if everyone's hassling the same guy for information about the route, he might get a bit upset, I don't know, or it might just be really helpful. So that can help you a lot to understand what certain areas are like, but both in a more micro level and like what that road might be like specifically, but on a more macro level, like what roads are like in Albania, which ones are going to be okay, which ones are not going to be so good. And heat maps is quite good for that as well. You know, I've even resorted to like going on YouTube sometime and searching specific roads, because a lot of people in 4x4s like posting videos of them driving around mountain roads in Albania and things like this. So if you think a bit outside the box, you can find quite good information on what things are going to be like in different places. With that in mind, the final point for this one when you're planning a route is previous editions of TCR. If you haven't already cottoned onto it, you know, you can find all of the old routes and maps from people that have done TCR before online. Either their planned route on a route planning software platform, or if you go on to either the Follow My Challenge, the more recent years for TCR, or go on to Track Leaders, you can find routes that have been ridden for events in the past. And, you know, you might find that your event this year is similar to the route of an event in the past, and people are generally having to go between the same section points in areas, and you can understand where someone went. And, you know, you could get in touch with them and say, hey, I saw you rode this route. Do you remember what it was like? And they're probably going to be quite helpful. Most people in the community are quite helpful. And I'm sure if you don't already know people in the community, someone is going to be more than happy to help you by sharing some information with you from the past. So, you know, looking up information, asking people for information, it's a free world. Get out there and do it. And the more you can find, the better your route's going to be. All right. And so my final kind of point is about during the event. So obviously you've spent a lot of time planning on route. You spent a lot of time, you know, invested into it. I think I used to spend between 70 and 100 hours planning a route for TCR, which is a lot of time. But if you have sort of, you know, 6 months to do it, spread out over 6 months, it's not so bad. But as I say, it is something that you should be building into your weekly plan and always working on and optimizing. Now, with that in mind, if you've spent a good amount of time building a route, like hopefully a you know, good person you are, your route should be pretty good. Okay, there might be the odd error here and there because it's very difficult to have something that's absolutely perfect. But if you have spent a lot of time building a route, you should be confident in it. You should think that your route's quite good, because if it wasn't, you would have planned something else. And the point to this one is, during the route and during the event, stick to your route, okay? Year after year after year, I hear stories and talk to people who've changed their route during the event. And it's just the start of a cascade of terrible decisions. And things will just go wrong and wrong and wrong, okay? I'm not talking about needing to reroute 5 kilometers because the road's closed. Obviously, you're going to have to do that. But people will get to Italy and they'll see, most people have gone a bit further north that are ahead of me. Why am I not going that way? Oh, I'm going to get the tracker and I'm just going to start following them rather than continuing my route. Just don't do it. It's going to be such a waste of time. It's going to be so inefficient, okay? You've built a route. You've hopefully spent a lot of time doing that, and you've hopefully spent a lot of time checking it. You need to trust your route, trust yourself, and stick to it, because you've built a route that you're confident in. You've built a route that's good for you, and also you've built a route that you know, because once you've built that route, you will have spent time going over it, learning it, generally understanding the flow of it, the mountain ranges, the valleys, towns, the cities, all of this. So you understand it. So just stick to your route and don't change it. Don't question yourself. Don't get nervous. Don't do any of those things and think, I want to go some other way, maybe a while. No, no. The best thing you could do is don't look at the tracker at all. Just ride your route, do your own thing, and you'll arrive there when you arrive there, okay? In calmness. So that kind of brings me to the end of my tips, tricks, general points. Obviously, I could talk to you for hours and days about route planning and all of these sorts of things, but hopefully those are quite useful. There was a lot there, I think, and I am going to get this bullet point list across to you so that you have a list of that. All right. I'm happy to open everyone up to questions. If anyone has any questions, I think you should be able to either put it in the chat, might be the best thing instead of everyone talking over each other, or if you've got any questions, or if no one's got any, then I'm not available for route planning by the hour, by the way. So there you go.
Thank you, James. That was really, really good. So many absolutely spot on tips there, I think. And yeah, I'm just going to say one or two things that you touched on here. But in the meantime, yeah, drop your questions for James in the chat if you have any. So there were three sort of really brief things that you touched on there that I just wanted to highlight a little bit more. James talked about banned roads can change. He's absolutely right. We will update you if they do. I know lots of you on the Discord at the moment are talking about Macedonia. I'm going to basically Macedonia is undergoing a very extensive road building program at the moment, and they're upgrading a lot of their roads to motorways. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time staring at maps and also maybe going there because I'm currently in Albania. And I will make sure you all have clarity before too long, hopefully before the end of the month. So don't worry about Macedonia for the moment. You will all have clarity and you will all be on an equal footing. So that's the first thing. Secondly, James talked about asking for help with route planning. As he said, he was spot on. Totally fine to go to someone and say, "What's this road like?" And not fine to be like, "Can you plan this section of route for me?" I'm sure that's clear to you all. Just the distinction there, because as we've just heard, route planning is such a huge part of the race, and TCR is a race for all rounders. We wouldn't want to deprive any of you of the joy of spending 70 to 100 hours staring at ride with GPS. So yeah, that was the second thing, and then final thing. James mentioned using the driving setting on Ride with GPS. Now, Alex from Ride with GPS, who I believe is here somewhere, told me the other day that they've reinstated the avoid highways button on the Ride with the GPS driving option. So you can now use that to hopefully avoid motorways. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't also do your own due diligence and check that you're happy cycling along every road on your route. Of course, you should do that. But that hopefully has now been added back. Now, James, just seen a question come in from Ferdy. Can you share some of your experiences with road, traffic, customs, behavior of other people in traffic in the various countries we'll be crossing, i.e. what can we expect? Well, that's a pretty broad one for you, James. Do you want to take that on?
Yeah, it is a pretty broad one. I mean, generally, most countries live up to the stereotypes, and I think I could say that. I don't want to get banned from anywhere. Obviously Italy's Italy, and we know generally it has a higher number of people killed in fatalities there, sadly. And Italy's always been like somewhere that I've not particularly enjoyed riding my bike. Whereas when you come into the Balkans, yeah, people are actually a bit more crazy driving in the Balkans generally. If you don't have a 2-car head-on overtake in the Balkans, then I will be surprised. And you will just have to get off the road. But they also have a bit more awareness, I think, and are generally, quite all right with their cars. Whereas maybe, I don't know, some other countries are just driving around on their phone or drunk and not really paying attention. I'm not really sure that's very good and helpful advice. But I think that the point is that everywhere will be a bit different, and everyone will have different experiences everywhere. Someone will have a great experience in Italy, someone will have a bad experience in Italy. Someone will have a great experience at one border crossing, someone will have another really bad experience at another border crossing. And you just need to be kind of not on your guard, but just, keep your, senses aware all the time, really. Obviously, different time of days on the same road are completely different. And so that there isn't really any general advice apart from you need to look after yourself and just be kind of aware of what's going on and the time of day and things like this. And yeah, that's it. I know it's not very helpful, but yeah, so it's a difficult thing.
Totally, and I think especially you touched on talking to people who've ridden similar routes before, and the way the race is running this year means there'll be fewer of those routes that sort of cross over from previous years. So you will be doing a lot of route planning from scratch, which is great. You can all go have your own individual adventures. I've just seen in the chat, Alex has posted the avoid highways option. So there's a link there so you can learn a bit more about it. Do we have any other questions? Or was James so comprehensive in his session that you don't have anything to follow up with? He's covered everything. Give you all another few seconds. You can unmute and talk, or you can. We've got another question in the chat. I've made a few versions of my route, i.e. shortcuts on gravel or longer road sections. Would it make sense to keep both in mind and decide when I get there? Good question, James.
Yeah, it is a good question. I think I had it in my bullet points. I might not have mentioned it. Was optimization of your route and versions of your route. And this is like a more advanced thing, not that planning a route is that difficult, but more advanced in that the strategy decision on should I go option A or option B at the computer, and then should I go option A, option B when you're out in the field. Now, having options is good, but if they lead to paralysis and you're standing around for half an hour working out which way you should go, then it's not so good. I think generally most people are on the side of going longer, but on tarmac, as long as it's not a hell of a lot longer, because it's a known quantity. Tarmacs are easier to ride, it's less fatiguing, there's less risk of like a punch or a crash versus shortcuts on gravel. But then it probably also depends on the setup of your bike. Are you going with a setup that's more good for gravel or a setup that's more good for road? And also depends on your probable sense for adventure. Do you want to go on just a wicked and wild adventure where if you make it to the finish or not, you're not so worried, but you've had an adventure? Or do you just want to really get to the finish and you want to play it safe and play it cool? So versions of your route is a good thing to do. I think fix yourself one version to start with, get the whole thing done really well, boom, one. And if you've got time to play with, then look at optimization and different versions for specific areas. And then when you've done that and you've got two versions or maybe different sections in different places, then you can consider if you want to take them out onto the road or not with you. And obviously, if they're in road GPS, you plan them, you've got them on the road anyway. And maybe you make a few strategy criteria like decision-making matrix, and you can do that at home before you leave. Like if the weather is good, if I'm feeling good, if I'm well fed, if it's early in the morning, okay, I'll go the gravel way. If I'm arriving there late in the evening, if the weather's bad, if I'm kind of hungry, right, I'm definitely going the tarmac way. So if you've got a few decision criteria pre-made before you leave home, then you can just make that decision in 3 seconds, and you know which way you're going. All right.
Great. One more question we've just had in, James. So I think Chris has sort of answered his own question here. I think he knows the answer, but he wants you to confirm it for him.
All right, I see that. Not so much a routing question, but more on devices. Some riders carry a second GPS device, i.e. Garmin. Have you had experience of devices failing on a trip like this, having to fall back onto a phone or something else? Yeah. Now, obviously, I think now 2025, you spend £600 on a Garmin, you'd expect it to be not a POS, but most GPS devices are still an absolute POS for £600. Why I can buy an Android phone for £250 and it works perfectly well, but Garmin can't make something for that price if it doesn't work, I don't know, or Wahoo, or all of them. So they're all terrible, basically, is my point, and they all fail. So you should 100% have a backup GPS device, and then you should have your phone as well, which serves as an absolute fail-stop device or a more on-the-fly quick routing. My preferred way I ran it, and this isn't the best way, this is just how I did it, was I had a Garmin main head unit that I ran on my Dynamo. Then I had an eTrex that took AA batteries, and the reason was it was a double fail-safe. If my Dynamo stopped working, I could use the eTrex with the batteries, or if the Garmin stopped working, I could just use that while I sorted the Garmin out. So yeah, you want to back up. The other thing is that your backup should be basically a carbon copy of your main device. There's no time delay in starting to use it or trying to use it. So you could literally just pull it out of your bag and boom, put it on your head unit, twizzle on your handlebars, and just keep navigating. And then you can either try and hard reset the other Garmin as you're going, or reset it later at a hotel. And if you've got your kind of phone and Garmin and everything, or Wahoo, whatever you want to use, synced up, then you can put the routes back on it. Back in the day, you used to be able to put SD cards in Garmin's and things, which was pretty good because you could have another SD card with all your routes in it and just hard reset it and stick that in. Nowadays, not so much. But yeah, the answer's 2 GPS devices. If you don't have a second one, just borrow one off a friend or beg one or something. Don't go and buy one because it's so expensive. The whole thing is so expensive already. And then you've got your phone as well, which is your fail-safers.
Great.
There are 2 other questions, so I'll answer those. What were your main learnings and mistakes made at your first time planning a similar undertaking? So what would you do different after you rode it? Mistakes that you would like us not to make? I mean, yeah, there's not time to answer all of that. Honestly, route planning was never something that I made a mistake at, because it's how my mind works, and I was very good at it for the first time I did it, because I had a lot of experience there. My mistake was pushing my body too hard during the event, and my mind was a lot stronger than my body physically, and my body physically gave out on me. So I think the answer to that would be that you need to listen to your body. Fatigue is real, and if you try and ride through fatigue or over fatigue yourself, then it will catch up with you eventually. I try and say to people, these things are hard enough. You don't need to go looking for hard. Hard will find you. Okay, so take it easy, and I'm sure by the time you're 3,000 kilometers in, you'll be getting slapped in the face because it's difficult. So don't try and make it hard from the beginning. The final question: any good ferry crossing tips to share or watch out for in advance of during the race? Well, I guess the only tip here is don't rely on TCR for giving you up-to-date information on ferry crossings, because they might not. So yeah, they're like a bit of jeopardy. So make sure you're doing your own research on if ferry crossings are running or not running. I don't really have any general tips for you on this. Personally, I don't really like ferry crossings. I kind of, some people do, some people don't. For me, it's not really great. I think my only point on ferry crossings is something that's really not related to the logistics of the ferry crossing. But, your ferry crossing is in Italy at some point after you've ridden, 2,500 plus kilometers, maybe 3,000. Your body will be quite fatigued by this point and quite tired. And it will be running on adrenaline or, joy or whatever it's running on, or sugar. When you get on the ferry, and it's not the quickest ferry, it's quite a long ferry. When you get on the ferry, your body is going to start to think that you've finished, and it's going to start to shut down, and it's going to start to kind of go into rest mode. And this is quite a big problem because it will start swelling up and it will start going stiff. And you need to kind of be aware of this and do your best to prevent it from happening. And there's not a lot you can do because it is going to think you're finished, and at the minute you're thinking, this guy's crazy, what's he talking about? But just wait, you'll get there and you'll see what I'm saying. Your body will have just been running on endorphins to get you to this point, and if you didn't have to stop for a long period of time, it will keep doing so. But when you do stop, it will think you're finished and quit on you. So what tactics you want to employ for this? Well, it's a bit difficult. Obviously you need to sleep and rest on the ferry and do that. Walk around, keep moving as well. So you're not just sitting still completely, so that your body can't go completely stiff, because when you try and get off the ferry and start cycling again, it's going to be so stiff and so sore. It will dissipate afterwards, but it will take some time. And, if you want to tell yourself stuff mentally when you get on the ferry, right, we're not finished yet, we've got to keep going. Body, you can't shut down yet. We're just resting from it. All of this sort of stuff. Whether you think that kind of thing works or not is up to you, but you can try that as well. So just be cautious of that. All right. Maybe it won't happen to you. Maybe you've looked after yourself so well and you've not pushed yourself too hard and you're just doing great, and that's great. But if it does, then just be aware of that, and you're going to have a difficult time when you get off the ferry and try and start cycling again. So not route planning, but there you go.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. Yeah. All really good points. And yes, as you all hopefully know, it's your responsibility to work out what ferries are running and what ferries aren't. So treat it like a road or something like that. If a road's closed, we're not going to tell you about it, unless it's on the parkour, in which case hopefully we find out before you and can tell you about it. But yeah, loads of really good stuff there, James. Thank you so much for that. You can really see not only all your experience, but the analytical quality of your mind there, and breaking everything down and thinking about everything step by step. So that's really good and hopefully really useful for everyone. So yeah, thank you very much. What I will do is send the link round to everyone. It will be today or tomorrow that it goes out, because I might have another few notes to add to the email as well. Reassure you about your routes and about banned roads and things like that. One final question, which I guess is for me. How do we find out if roads are closed before we get there? Normally you can't, because with a road network the size of Europe's, it's just not really possible. Wow.
I think I'd add one point on that, is that if you look at like car route navigating apps like Waze or stuff like this, generally they're going to give you the most up-to-date information on stuff's closed, but you don't really have time to do that. So if it's bigger stuff like TCI Bandit, then or not, but otherwise trying to use Waze and do stuff on the road is more difficult. Obviously, if you're following someone that's on a similar route, you can look at the tracker and see if they've turned around or not, but really you won't find out till you get there. So yeah.
That's exactly it, and that's when you'll need James's other tip about making sure you know how to use your routing app. So you'll get your phone out and find a way around it. But yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, James. I will send this round so that you can catch up on it.
And I'll send my bullet point notes to you, and if you want to include that in your email, then do that. But if you want to, I'll send that.
That'd be great. Yeah. Cheers. Right. Cheers, James. Yeah, thanks very much for your time. Thanks, Alex, Rival GPS. And I hope you all have a good rest of your evening. Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.